June 2, 1965. Dearest Suzie, this is going to be a short letter because I am beat tonight. We had another 9-hour day today, but we didn't accomplish an awful lot. I don't know how we could owe that car lot any more money, but I guess you might as well pay it and be done with it. I guarantee you that the next car we buy will be a new one. No more used car problems. I finally got your shirts tonight, and if anything happens, I will get them in the mail tomorrow morning. I just wish you could get them before I call you, but I doubt that you will. Also, I doubt if Brian's will fit. My tailor used the measurements you sent, he said, but it doesn't look right to me. Anyway, I hope they fit. And at first, when I saw yours, I blew my stack, but he told me that women's clothes are always just the opposite of a man's. That's why your night is on the wrong side. I guess he knows more about it than I do. So, I accepted his word on it. I hope you like them. And if they fit, how about getting me a slide made right away? In fact, send me 2. Lewis Litt wants one. I go along with your idea about the TV 100%, and just as soon as I get home, we'll get Bill those double bunks that he wants. I think your idea is better. I'm beginning to worry about that package, too. It has been 8 weeks now since I sent it. I imagine the post office people stopped it for inspection because it is a large package and I only claimed a value of $10, but there is a lot of junk in it, so they shouldn't say anything about it. Well, I will close and go to bed. I am dead dog tired tonight. I did not forget our anniversary. It is just that I couldn't think of anything that I could send to you mail that you would like. At least I will be thinking of you just like every day, and I love you 8 good years worth. All my love. Bill. Though Popi doesn't mention it in today's letters, or anywhere else in these materials for that matter, it feels irresponsible to talk about the Vietnam War without talking about Agent Orange. I would like to talk about it today just a bit. When most people think about Agent Orange, they think about the devastating health effects it caused, not just for the Vietnamese civilians who lived near the spray zones, but also for American soldiers who served in those areas. But back in 1965, most of the men on the ground didn't really know what it was. Popi never mentions it by name in his letters. When he saw the chemical used, he would have thought of it the way most troops did, as a tool to clear the jungle and make things safer for flight operations or base patrols. Agent Orange was a chemical herbicide, one of several color-coded defoliants used by the U.S. military. It got its name from the orange stripe painted on the 55-gallon drums it was stored in. It was part of something called Operation Ranch Hand, which began in 1962 and aimed to strip away dense jungle foliage that offered cover to the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces. The logic was straightforward. No trees, no places to hide. Between 1962 and 1971, the U.S. sprayed more than 19 million gallons of herbicides over rural South Vietnam, and Agent Orange was by far the most heavily used. Planes, helicopters, trucks, and even handheld sprayers misted it across fields, forests, rivers, and villages. Sometimes it was used to destroy crops, especially in areas thought to be feeding enemy fighters. Agent Orange contained dioxin, a toxic compound that's now known to be one of the most dangerous chemicals ever created. At the time, the military and the chemical companies involved, including Monsanto and Dow, either didn't know or didn't disclose just how hazardous it was. Troops weren't given protective gear, villagers weren't evacuated, the jungle, along with everything and everyone in it, absorbed the spray. It took years for the full scope of Agent Orange's damage to become clear. Veterans began organizing and demanding answers in the late 1970s. Some of them had returned home to find their children born with serious health problems. Others were developing illnesses they couldn't explain. It may not have been in his letters, but Popi used to speak about his exposure to Agent Orange. He said his commanding officers, as they introduced the chemical, would drink the stuff to show how safe it was. I don't know how that makes much sense because they knew it was a defoliant. I can't imagine what that did to their bodies. Though he admitted to exposure near the end of his life when he could have applied for aid through the VA, which would have guaranteed him monthly payments, some of which would still be sent to Meemaw today, he refused. He said that he was doing his job, didn't deserve anything more than anyone else, and didn't do any more than anyone else. We were angry with him for this decision because that aid could have financially helped Meemaw after his passing. One of the most disturbing aspects of Agent Orange exposure isn't just what it did to the people who came into contact with it. It's what it may have passed on. Research over the past few decades suggests that exposure to dioxin can cause epigenetic changes, meaning it may alter the way genes are expressed without changing the DNA itself. These changes can affect fetal development and be passed down to future generations. In other words, the children, and even grandchildren, of those exposed to Agent Orange have shown higher rates of birth defects, developmental disorders, and other health issues. It's not just a toxic legacy, it's a biological one, encoded in the very bodies of families who never set foot in Vietnam. My father was born with a few health problems, and had some develop in his lifetime which are on the list of health issues often associated with Agent Orange exposure. He was the only son of Popis born after exposure in Vietnam, and it is quite coincidental that my dad was the only one with these problems. For example, when I was a kid, we had a pretty big few weeks finding out that he had an unruptured brain aneurysm. It's something he's had to live with his whole life. Literally, it's acted as a ticking time bomb in his head, a dark shadow which, one day, could be deadly. One birth defect noted for children of those exposed to Agent Orange, however, is actually malformed blood vessels. Could his aneurysm be one of these instead? He also had epilepsy, and so did my brother, another health issue associated with Agent Orange. I only mention these things to talk about the material and lived result of Popi's service. He may have been the one who went over there. The people of Vietnam may be the ones he interacted with. But there are still echoes of his service, literally ingrained in our DNA, even 2 generations later. Today, it is estimated that in Vietnam there could be as many as 3 million people in the past 50 years who have been born with birth defects directly attributed to Agent Orange exposure. During his memorial service, one of my dad's cousins and I got into a conversation about religion. She's a big bless your heart, come to Jesus type. We love her for it. As I started telling her about my revelations about Agent Orange and its potential connection to some of our health problems, she referenced original sin, the Christian notion of a sinful condition of humanity inherited by Adam and Eve because of the fall. I had never been a big believer or proponent of the idea, but for some reason, her bringing it up to me clicked. Popi did things in Vietnam, and they echoed through the generations, changing our very DNA. It may be bad, but it was something we inherited. We were born with it. Can the same be said about his actions over there? The things he did? The people he hurt? The people he helped? The photo I chose for today is an aerial shot of boats and buildings on a river. There's much green space on the borders. This could have been an area sprayed, seeking to cut through the dense forest to access the people living underneath. The half-life for Agent Orange in waterways is estimated to be 100 years. June 65. Dearest Suzie, got your letter today and I was happy to hear that you all are okay. How can I say anything about you not writing every day when I don't do it myself? Fair is fair. I can imagine how hard it is to find something to write every day. I enjoy getting them, but as long as I hear from you about every other day, I'm happy. Glad you like that material. I thought it was real pretty. And I'm glad that Robison got one of those silk pictures. I always thought a lot of him. In fact, if I had thought of it, I would have sent him one. How did Laverne like hers? This has been a busy week for us. I guess it is better that way because this week has just flown by. Tomorrow is R&R day for me, and I will be glad to get away from here for a while. Also, if nothing happens, I will be going to Nha Trang on the 16th for 7 days, and all I'm going to do is lay on the beach for 7 days. I don't mind the crabs. I want you to do one favor for me, and it will be kind of hard to do, but I can't do it over here. Get a copy of Life magazine from May 28th. You won't be able to buy it. You will have to find someone who has a copy of it. When you do find a copy, cut out page 23 and save it for me. It is titled, In Search of a Vietnam Hero. It is about a very good friend, and I was right over him when he was killed. And I want a copy of this article for my souvenirs. Do you still have your short timers calendar? You can start using it on the 16th of this month. Everything is the same over here. We are staying pretty busy. I love you all and miss you very much. All my love. Bill. After reading this letter over a year ago, I immediately ordered the exact Life magazine Popi asked me all to buy. I knew she wouldn't have kept it. I did find the exact article he mentioned. That's one of my favorite parts of this project. finding other things that I can use to connect directly to Popi's letters and his service, which always excites me. These things, like the magazine or the Bob Hope specials, almost feel like an extension of his archive, things which act as primary sources and can only add to the story. It reads as follows. In Search of a Vietnam Hero. The View from Here. Loudon Wainwright. Harold Dale Meyercord was a man who liked to keep track of meaningful events, and among his records is a list headed Dates on which I was on boats receiving hostile fire. The entries are numbered, and with each date there is also written the place of action. The list begins with August 13th, 1964. The final item is the number 30, put down by Meyercord in reasonable anticipation after he had finished with number 29, but there is no date or place beside it. To complete the record, it should read March 16th, on a canal in the Duc Ton district of the Vietnamese Delta, and the hostile fire Meyercord drew there that day that killed him. Except that he died in it. The action was not extraordinary. Meyercord himself had participated in many more spectacular engagements. He was killed in a sudden flurry of fire at the end of the day's operations, and if he had time to think after the shooting started and before the rifle bullet reached his brain, he must have been furious at being taken so by surprise. For if anything can be said with certainty of Lieutenant Dale Meyercord, USNR, it is that he knew precisely where to expect trouble and was usually ready for it. The word aggressive, in fact, is the one most often used by Meyercord's colleagues in their efforts to describe him, and it is always offered as the highest form of compliment. In their view, though they probably would not use the term, Dale Meyercord was a hero. The true proportions of heroes have always held a deep fascination for me, and when I first heard about Meyercord, I wondered what a search beyond and beneath the formal accounts of his gallantry would reveal. Would it, for example, tell me why he behaved so heroically? Would it show me what sort of man he was between braveries? Would I find out what he thought and what he cared about? Could I, in short, come to know him? The official records in Saigon provided some details on Meyercord's job and on his behavior in it. His duty was to advise the Vietnamese commander of the 23rd River Assault Group working in the labyrinthine rivers and canals of the Mekong Delta. He had also to work on the planning and carrying out of operations with other military leaders, both Vietnamese and American. The 19 boats of the River Assault Group, or RAG, were used to carry Vietnamese troops to battle, but they were more than transport vessels. Varying in length, from 60 to 35 feet, they carried substantial firepower, mortars, 40 and 20 millimeter guns, 50 and 30 caliber machine guns. When they lined up and brought all these weapons to bear, they became a murderous force. If Meyercord was aggressive, his counterpart, the Vietnamese RAG skipper, Nguyen Van Hoa, suited him exactly. The two men plotted constantly for action, and when they weren't carrying troops on an operation, they patrolled the waterways on the lookout for pockets of Viet Cong. On days when nothing was going on with the boats, Meyercord went to the airfield near his base at Vinh Long and flew in observation missions in small reconnaissance planes or armed helicopters. From these trips, many of which drew fire as the choppers swooped down as low as 50 feet, Meyercord increased his knowledge of the area and kept his charts up to date. His superiors recalled that he was 27, was married, had a wife and small daughter living in St. Louis, and that he had served on a destroyer before coming to Vietnam. There was better documentation of some of his actions. On one occasion, last November, his RAG landed troops, then got well ahead of them in a canal so narrow that it was impossible for the boats with the heaviest guns to come up and fire. When the other boats began to draw sniper fire, Meyercord scouted ahead on foot, found that the canal was blocked and that the Viet Cong were waiting in force. Under heavy fire, he set up a command post, called for and directed artillery, summoned airstrikes, and when friendly troops caught up with him, he directed them too in routing the Viet Cong. Another time, when one of the RAG boats was damaged and 2 Vietnamese sailors were wounded, Meyercord left his own boat, took another to the vessel where that wounded man were, gave them first aid, and then got back to his boat. All this time in the middle of a firefight. On a third occasion, his RAG guns could not be fired because friendly troops were in the way. Meyercord ordered the boats to back down the canal. Where the Vietnamese troops saw this, they thought the operation was being cancelled and began a quick retreat themselves. Then suddenly, Meyercord ordered the boats ahead, past the troops, and now, with a clear field of fire, he opened up with all the guns he had. The battle was won. Dale Meyercord's own log and reports are entirely matter-of-fact, even in some places laconic. "I don't wear a helmet or flak vest," he wrote at one time. "My preparations consist of setting my carbine on auto and loading it with a clip and tracers. These I will use to direct fire. After he'd picked up an enemy flag in the field one day, he wrote, "The flag I can use for trade goods to obtain more weapons or other desired items." After his Jeep went off the road one day when a landmine exploded just ahead, he said of it, "Examination showed that several muscles and tendons were injured." He could be sharply critical when he did not like the way things were going, and he is said of one American officer whose performance didn't suit him, "An advisor that is overly cautious and places needless stumbling blocks in an operation is a handicap," and he must have been laughing at himself when he wrote, "While jumping from the boat to the pier with my gear, the pier collapsed and I ended up in the Mekong. This presented an excellent opportunity to test my waterproof watch and equipment. It all worked when I got ashore and tested it." From men in Saigon, I learned a bit more about Dale Meyercord. "I could see right away that this was a ruddy, gung-ho individual," said his boss, Captain W.H. Hardcastle, Jr. "He seemed to have maturity and confidence in himself." I learned that Meyercord's radio code name was Hornblower. He used to talk about his Delta experience a lot, a friend recalled. Sometimes even too much. He told about it in such detail a person might think he was bragging, but why should a brave man be modest and charming? He was fascinated by the whole thing. When he tried to explain to you one of his eyeball-to-eyeball moments, you could see he was exhilarated by it. A snapshot told me that only Meyercord was blonde, and lean, and not tall. I flew to Vinh Long to meet more of Meyercord's friends. It is only 45 minutes by helicopter from Saigon, but the trip takes one into an entirely different world. The ugly little war in Vietnam seems suddenly much more personal, and the chopper pilot only slows his blades to let his passengers off. The town and the bases there are secure enough, but the VC are active in the countryside, immediately surrounding it, and precautions against enemy marksmanship, like bringing aircraft into the tiny field at a rate of descent so sharp that a landing seems virtually a controlled crash, are entirely called for. This had been Dale Meyercord's town for the last 8 months of his life. He had died in a canal just a few kilometers up the road, and it was the right place to come. "He spent a lot of time with us out here," said Captain Clarence Boyle, pilot and section leader for the small spotter and observation planes used in the area. Everybody here at the field had a lot of respect for him. The VC respected him too. They knew all about him and his iron boats. Somebody tried to change his call sign from Hornblower to something else, but he just wouldn't answer from that boat when we gave him the new call, and he had to go back to Hornblower. Meyercord's Vietnamese counterpart, Commander Wall, was away on Navy business, and I was not able to see him. But it became clear from talking to others that this relationship between the two men was more than professional. They had spent much off-duty time together, and Wall had invited Meyercord to be the godfather of a child born shortly after the American died. Navy Chief Ralph Gentle had been with Meyercord during his tour in Vietnam, but he was not on the boat the afternoon of the lieutenant's death, and he feels badly about it. "We used to talk on the boat at night when no one was around," Gentile said. "He told me how he'd worked on farms in the summers when he was a kid, going through college. He talked about his mother some, and he talked about his wife and daughter. I'm 42, a lot older than him, and he was very interested in how my wife and I were bringing up our kids, about what kind of things we wanted for them, about how much money we're spending on them. I think he was trying to get some ideas of what he might do for his own child in the future. Sometimes you'd think he was out here on a goodwill tour," Gentile went on as we drank beer on a porch overlooking the Mekong River. "He took about 100 school kids out for a ride on the boats one day, and he was very good with the local Vietnamese chiefs. He scrounged a lot of medical instruments, and a doctor showed him how to make stitches. His stitches looked a little tangled, but they did the job." Gentile paused a moment. "I think he tried to protect me," he continued. "He tried to keep me away from him when there was something doing on the boats. I used to kid him when he'd go off on an operation without me. 'Well, what do you want me to tell your wife?' I'd ask him. 'Hell,' he'd say. 'Them bullets turn away every time they come toward me.' At the airfield that night, the armed helicopters came back very late from a big and successful fight. I talked to the leader, Captain Robert Molinelli. 'The day before Dale was killed,' Molinelli said, his dirty face drawn with fatigue. 'We flew out there together to that canal. We both knew it well. Dale was one of the few people we could work in real close to and not scare him or his troops. Those rockets make a hell of a noise. Woof when they go, crack when they break the sound barrier, boom when they hit.' Molinelli took a sip of his iced drink. 'I was 10 feet above his head that day,' he went on. 'As a matter of fact, I tried to shoot for him, but he told me to go away. I told him to get his fanny out of the open. Just a little later, somebody called and told me Hornblower had been hit. He loved to fight, and he loved to live. I couldn't believe it.' Army Captain James Snooks III was observing the operation from Meyercord's boat the day he was killed. Snooks, a Navy chief named Eugene Barney, and Meyercord were on the open deck of the lead vessel when it went slowly around a curve and nosed in toward the bank. Meyercord, apparently not expecting anything, was seated with his back up against the windshield of the boat when the firing started. I could see the muzzle flashes and smoke, Snooks recalled. We were receiving fire from 3 positions, quite close, 30 to 40 yards. I was down on the deck now, and the firing with the carbine, and Barney was shooting the shotgun. Meyercord may have been shooting too, but I wasn't looking at him. I heard him say, "I'm hit!" Barney reached up to pull him down, got hit himself, and Meyercord got hit again. Barney said, "Lieutenant Meyercord is dead." I looked, and then he was right. I also talked to Major Oscar Paget, Jr., senior advisor to a Vietnamese infantry regiment. He worked with Meyercord on many operations. His contribution was high as any I've ever seen, Paget said. If you send one of the best over here, you're going to lose the best. He was often working from an exposed position because he could report enemy strengths and weaknesses to us better that way, and he set a great example for the men. If he found out that I had been in operation with his bunch wasn't in on, he'd be knocking at the door. "Why can't I go?" he'd say. "There are canals down there I know better than anybody else." He was a pretty smart lad. He liked to laugh and lie and kid me about how he was furnishing the ammunition for the army. Paget paused and frowned in his recollection. "I didn't really like that hat, though," he said. "It was an Australian-type bush hat, one of those things that turns up on the side. I told him if I was shooting at the boats, I'd shoot at somebody with a hat like that. But Wall had a hat too, a floppy one he called his fighting hat. I told Dale they looked like sheep herders in them. When they brought him in on the litter, there was that hat down around his feet." Meyercord's replacement, as advisor to the 23rd Rag, is a cheerful young lieutenant named David Swavely. He knew Meyercord and admired him, but he did not talk much about him. He did not want to ask, but I finally had to inquire if Swavely had found it difficult to follow in the footsteps of a man so generously respected as Meyercord. "Oh no," he answered with absolute candor. "These people around here made things very easy for me. They do all kind of things for me. They see the Navy coming, and automatically, you're Hornblower." The last person I talked with in Vinh Long was Hugo Aragon, an Army Chief Warrant Officer. He did not work with Meyercord on operations, but the two men spent much free time together and were close friends. "That was a strong, outspoken personality," Aragorn said. "He told you what he thought, and he didn't think he'd die here. That day I was going on a trip in the Jeep and crossed a bridge over one of the canals, and I saw him on the boats. I tooted the horn at him, and he waved back." Aragon, a short, dark man, crossed the little room and fumbled through some belongings. He came back and handed me an empty pint flask. "I'm a Scotch drinker," Aragon said, "and you can't get it every place around here. You have to carry it with you. 2 days before he died, Dale gave me that. It was his." I turned the flask over and saw the initials, HDM, in the silver plate. A flask says nothing. You can't even tell much about a man by reading his words or talking to his friends. But by this time, I wished heartily that I had some recollections of my own about Dale Meyercord. Thank you for indulging me and allowing me to read that article, even if it was a little long. I know I didn't write it, but it felt important to share. It is written as if it's another snapshot of not just life in Vietnam, but life in Vietnam in 1965 in Vinh Long. It even quotes Molinelli, the same guy that invited Popi to fly the hog, the guy who made Popi a rocket man. I don't know what else to say. That connection is just neat. The final reflections by Loudon Wainwright are intriguing. He talks about how you'd never really get to know a man by reading his words, he wrote, or talking to his friends. In some sense, you, the listener, the people who never met Popi, are in the same situation. I can give you some approximation of who Popi was as a grandfather. I can share stories about what he was like as a father or a husband, but that only goes so far, doesn't it? We can read the words he wrote, or even see the war the same way he saw it through his photos. But does that ever mean you'll actually get to know him? If that's the case, how much can we ever really truly know someone? How much can we ever really know ourselves? Regardless of this questioning, I think one thing is clear. Wainwright, in his journey to Vinh Long, found a Vietnam hero. I'd like to think that in our own journey to the Mekong River Delta, together, we have found one as well. But just know that Popi would have hated to be called a hero. The photo I chose for today depicts a Vietnamese civilian boat on the bank of a river. It appears to be a boat with rooms, or at least an interior for people to sit in. Perhaps it was a ferry. It is the type of boat Meyercord would have seen when he was on the river. June 65. Dearest Suzie, today is Saturday, and I should be going on R&R tonight. I have a lot of things to do on this trip. I want to call you, visit the zoo again to get some pictures, and get to the PX and quartermaster. Each one of these things required just about a day, because it is so hard to get around in Saigon. I am not going to Nha Trang. I found out this morning that the only way you can get that free 7 days is to go to Bangkok or Hong Kong. If you stay in Vietnam, it costs leave time, so I'm not going anywhere. We will spend a week at Daytona with the money I save. Yesterday, after I wrote to you, we got called out for a mission and flew until 11 o'clock last night. There was a USO show here last night too, and we missed it. Martha Ray was here. They say the show was pretty good. Anyway, when we got in, she was in the officers' club getting soused on straight vodka. This morning, I found out that they had a party that lasted till 2 o'clock, and she was the life of the party. Anyway, I missed everything. Why does it worry you to hear of the trouble in Da Nang? That is 400 miles from here. Well, I will close for now. I love you all very much, and I am still counting the days. It won't be long now. Time you go to New Jersey and back, I will be short. All my love, Bill. To supplement today's letter, I'd like to reference an article from Stars and Stripes. When I was given the opportunity to do some research at the Library of Congress, this was one of the things that I found. Given Popi's materials and the stories he told, this particular article really stuck with me. It is titled, Elephant Hunting? Try a Helicopter. It was published on August 30th of 1965, and reads as follows. Vinh Long, Vietnam. Hunting elephants no longer means long days spent in the jungle following trails, or the fear of being attacked by wild beasts. If you go modern, get a helicopter. The Army's 114th Aviation Battalion's Cobra platoon on temporary duty from Vinh Long to Hue was on a reconnaissance mission 10 miles south of Cam Lo when 24-year-old Chief Warrant Officer Tony Casimano of Jamestown, New York, spotted an elephant in the foothills. Orders are to shoot all elephants in that area because they are used by the Viet Cong as pack animals. So Specialist 4 John Murphy, the 20-year-old gunner, brought the elephant down with 6 shots from his machine gun. The pilot, Captain Robert F. Molinelli, 32, Pocatello, Idaho, then contacted nearby Montagnards who badly needed fresh meat and flew them to the location. 4 men were brought in as security guards and 7 to do the cutting. Several copter trips were required to carry the thousands of pounds of meat to the waiting villages. The Montagnard village at Cam Lo was built only a short while ago and was very short of food. The local village chief allotted 240 pounds of rice for a feast. This is the greatest event in our village in many years, he said. The tusks? They were given to the 114th as a souvenir. Once again, in this article, we hear another connection to Popi's service, or Popi's letters. We hear Molinelli, Casimano, we hear 114th. Of course, this was written after Popi left, but close enough to his service for it to count. After reading this and considering all I knew about Popi, I couldn't help but be reminded of George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. Next episode, I will be sharing a piece of fiction that I wrote, inspired by all of these things, titled Shooting an Elephant in Vietnam. The photo I chose for today is taken from the inside of a helicopter. In the foreground is a soldier with his weapon. In the background, there is another helicopter also touched down in a rice paddy. There are a few soldiers on the ground around them. June 7. Dearest Suzie, I really enjoyed talking to you this morning, but I must admit I am twice as homesick now, especially after Brian's begging me to please come home. That got me right where it hurts. After I talked to you, I went back to the villa intending to get a nap since I got up at 5 o'clock. When I got there, our Saigon officer was waiting for me. I had to pack immediately and return to Vinh Long so I could pack up and move to Da Nang. So, here I am. All packed and ready to go. My platoon moved out early this morning. I will meet them in Da Nang tomorrow. I have no idea what is going on, but we were told that we would be up there for 30 days. About our bonds. I guess they never got my request to change it. I will have to put in another one. They are only holding out for a $50 bond. Bud Bender is going to take care of Charlie for me for the next 30 days. I'm tickled that Mickey has offered to come down and help you drive up. I hope you took him up on it, even though you won't have a car up there. Well, never a dull moment over here. I love you very much and miss you twice as much now, if that were possible. All my love, Bill. The following is the first part of a piece I wrote, titled Shooting an Elephant in Vietnam. It is based off of a Stars and Stripes article I found from 1965, Popi's materials, and the essay, Shooting an Elephant, by George Orwell. I hope you enjoy. Upon reflection, in Vinh Long and the Mekong River Delta of Vietnam, I was hated by a large number of people. This was not the first time, or the last for that matter, I had been important enough for this to happen. However, it was likely the only time that the hate was all justified. I was an American pilot, stationed in the air base outside of town, and, caught up in the long history of Vietnamese freedom fighting, anti-American sentiment was quite resounding in the area. None of the locals had the guts to take up arms themselves, however, we knew that when we weren't around, they were giving a detailed account of our every movement to the VC. Communist eyes and ears were no doubt on every street corner outside of base. All of this was quite upsetting, as I had already made up my mind that though America was not evil, I did not belong in this foreign country, and I doubted whether or not any soldier did at all. I was not for communism or the Vietnamese people. I simply believed that the lives of all people, but mainly Americans, were more important. As for the job I was doing, I found myself increasingly filled with fear every time I boarded my helicopter, afraid that I would not come down from the air alive. I managed to make it through the war without any major injuries, all while carrying out the orders I was given, prioritizing my safe return home to my wife and kids not arriving in a pine box. One day something happened which was enlightening. It was a tiny incident, but it gave me a better glimpse than I had ever before of the real nature of our war, the real motives for why we were risking American lives in Vietnam. On our way back to base from flying some routine mission, a door gunner clogged up our radios with inaudible pleas for my attention. Upon further investigation, I found that he had spotted what he thought to be an elephant in the distance, just in a clearing near a rice paddy. He begged me to let him do something about it. I knew what I wanted to do, but I also knew what our orders were. Elephants were open season in Vietnam for us Americans. They were pack animals and suspected of moving supplies around for the enemy. We were obligated to engage them. My co-pilot reminded me of policy and insisted that we talk things over with our gunner. All it took was the threat of a reporting to my CO, and I yielded my insistence that we just fly home. I radioed what we were going to do to the other birds in formation and peeled off in pursuit of the enemy combatant. The elephant, of course, had not actually done anything, and there was no evidence presented to prove that it was complicit in VC operations. However, we pursued the beast anyway. As it turned from a fuzzy gray blob to what I knew elephants to look like, I was reminded of my recent trip to Saigon. While on R&R, a few buddies of mine thought it would be fun to visit the zoo, which, in their defense, was popularly frequented by American GIs. This zoo had a small elephant, and this particular specimen was in a tiny pen that seemed much too constrictive for quite a large mammal. I remember thinking that it was oddly charismatic for something that lived such a terrible life. Like always, I had my camera on hand and snapped quick shots of other animals or the school children that ran around on field trips, but concentrated primarily on the playful pachyderm and the way it made the children smile. How, I asked myself, how could life go on so regularly here when things are so hectic, not a whole 2-hour flight away from here? The zoo's elephant was expressive, but I remembered his eyes most. I knew not what he was thinking, but I knew something was going on behind that trunk. Piercing static feedback interrupted my thoughts as my door gunner snorted over the comms. Turn to the right a bit so I can get a good line of sight, and don't get too low. I don't want you scaring off this Charlie. We can't let him get back into the trees. I did what I was asked, and within moments the M60 roared to life. My co-pilot screamed in approval, fueled by adrenaline and testosterone, but I felt so alone, since no one at base or in the nearby village really knew what we were doing. Elephants were important to most natives in this country. I had seen a few statues of them in temples I visited since they were an essential part of Vietnam's cultural heritage, and, according to our intel, also crucial to maintaining VC supply lines. But where were the natives now? And why could they not fire up a few warning shots letting us know that their soldiers are not to be trifled with so easily? I obviously had no intention of shooting the elephant. I did not know how killing such a thing would help us to defend ourselves, but I let the gunner do what he was supposed to do. It was a serious matter to shoot a working elephant, I'm sure. If the intel proved true, comparable to destroying a jeep or a tank, and obviously had we not been in a war, we would not have done it. From the air, and at a distance, peacefully chewing on some grass, the elephant looked no more dangerous than a cow. I turned my head from the action, knowing I did not need to watch. Just as soon as it began, the shooting ended. The M60 was muzzled, and my gunner bragged about his heroic triumph over the radio. "What now?" I asked my co-pilot. "I'll radio base," he replied. "See if the mess hall could use some extra protein. Lord knows I'm tired of sea rations. Worst comes to worst, we can take the meat to the village. You know they're always begging for food." I looked down to see the elephant laying on its side, almost appearing to have red polka dots all over its body. The thick blood was gushing from its sides like red velvet and began pooling, eventually running downhill into the paddy. I wondered if it would stain the rice. Maybe not, I responded to myself. After all, the blood of other VC doesn't seem to. I put the bird down just next to the carcass and allowed the gunner to jump off and confirm the kill, much to his excitement. I was thankful that I had forgotten my camera in my bunk that day. I didn't know how I could have told him no if he asked me to take his picture with his trophy. As I jumped to the ground, I routinely scanned the tree line for any sign of the enemy, but the eyes of the elephant ensnared me. I could not look away. They were open. They were expressive. Just like the elephant I had seen just weeks before. The sad existence in the zoo didn't seem so bad after all. That elephant would never have to worry about strafing from foreign combatants. The gunner immediately began dressing the animal. We may have been thousands of miles away from home and carving up something foreign, but a farm boy always somehow knew the best way to field dress a carcass. With the help of the co-pilot, he made quick work of the body, and by the time he was done, we got word back from the base that we did not need the meat. We were told that it would be best if we gave it to the village as an act of gory philanthropy. My guys asked me to help load everything on the Huey, but I insisted on maintaining the perimeter, even if I did only have my .45 on me. I knew I'd have enough work on my hands when we got back to base, and I had to wash away all the blood from the inside and outside of the chopper. I always ended up having to do that myself anyway. The photo I chose for today is an elephant in a zoo. It could be the Saigon or the Bangkok Zoo. He almost looks like he's smiling. June 11, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I doubt if you will get this letter before you go to New Jersey, but I am writing anyway. I have made the big move to Da Nang. It was like coming home again after a long field trip. Most of the people that I knew before are still here, so we had a big get-together night before last. I haven't flown since I got up here. All our ships are down for maintenance right now. I'm sure that our mail will be fouled up for a while. They say they are going to get mail up here twice a week, but I don't believe them. Also, they say that this is to be a 30-day trip, but I don't believe that either. But remember, in an earlier letter, I said that when you get back home, I will be short. Well, now when we both get back home, I will be short. I didn't get my orders before I left Vinh Long, so now I don't know how long it will take for me to get them. Even when they do come in, it will probably take 2 weeks for me to get them up here. Our quarters up here are a little better this time. We have hot water and fairly good rooms. We are staying in an old French hotel that the Army has leased. The food up here is better than Vinh Long, but it costs more. I forgot what day you told me Johnny was going to get married. Will you be there for the wedding? Give him my congratulations, I guess. I suppose the boys are looking forward to the trip to New Jersey, and just hope they don't give you a lot of trouble on the way up. Also, if you aren't gone by the time this letter gets home, have a good trip and happy anniversary. I haven't forgotten, if that's any consolation to you. Say hello to your folks for me when you get home. I love you all and miss you very much. Kiss the boys for me. All my love, Bill. The following is the second part of a piece I wrote titled Shooting an Elephant in Vietnam. It is based off a Stars and Stripes article I found from 1965, Popi's materials, and the essay Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. I hope you enjoy. When we touched down in the village, we were greeted by a large crowd which seemed to grow by the minute. We landed in a cow pasture just outside of the main thoroughfare, and people began blocking the roads on either side. I looked at the sea of yellow faces above the garish clothes, their faces all seemingly happy and excited over this gift, but also almost surprised that an elephant had actually been shot. As my guys transferred the meat to a wooden cart, the villagers watched us as they would watch a conjurer about to form a trick. Who knew if they liked us, but with the meat in our hands, we were interesting enough to watch. Children surrounded us with hands out, almost as if asking to pet the damn thing, and I had but a few pieces of chocolate on me that I handed out with vigor. What else was I to do to help those kids? The older ones stood in the back of the crowd and simply smiled and laughed. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn the laughter was almost uncomfortable. But we were always assured by the village elders that the children loved us for saving them from the communists. What did I really care what was true? After we finished, the village elders insisted that we take the tusks as a gift for our generosity. We knew we could not refuse and loaded them back onto the copter. Before we started up and flew away, my co-pilot looked at me with his longing eyes. "Sir, there are 3 of us and only 2 tusks. Obviously someone's going to have to go home empty-handed." "The guy who bagged the thing certainly deserves one, and so does the guy who held the bird steady. It's yours." My stomach sank at the thought of bringing home the big stick of ivory and hanging it above a mantel. "It's yours, and that's an order," I replied. Before I knew it, we were back in the air, the villagers down below waving goodbye to us as we flew away. It was at that moment, as I sat there clutching the yoke, that I first grasped the hollowness and futility of America's dominion in the East. Here we were, American men with our guns and helicopters, flying away from a timid native crowd. In our minds, we were angels of freedom coming from the sky, but in reality, we were only an absurd group of puppets pushed to and fro by the will of men on the radio, doing everything they can to make the yellow faces on the ground submit. I realized at that moment that when America turns tyrant, it is its own freedom that it destroys, because through its rule it attempts to suppress evil native forces, which actually believe us Americans to be destructive imperialists, and in every interaction, us soldiers do nothing more than what everyone expects of us. The voices on the radio expect us to follow orders and protocols to free the country of the Reds, while the villagers on the ground expect us to do things like shoot elephants, then come down from the sky and present them with the meat. "Here is what we think of your heritage and beloved animals. Be thankful that we allow you to eat it so we don't make you starve," they must think. We do nothing more than act the way that we are expected to act. The expectations, however, always at odds with one another. We committed to shooting the elephant when we boarded the Huey that morning. To come all that way from America, load ourselves up onto a helicopter that cost millions, strap a machine gun to its side, commit to fighting the VC, and then to not shoot an elephant when we saw one. No, that was impossible. The VC would know that we did not have control, that we were not in power, and our time in Vietnam, all of America's time in Vietnam, was one long struggle to maintain control. If we lost control here, the voices on the radio must have been afraid of losing control all across the world and could not let that happen. But I did not want to shoot the elephant. I watched him walk about the rice paddy, not much different than the one that had brought me joy just weeks before. It seemed to me that it would be murder to shoot him, even if he somehow helped the VC. I was not squeamish about killing animals, or men for that matter, but I had never shot an elephant and realized I never wanted to. When we landed back at the base, there were endless discussions about the shooting of the elephant. My CO was elated since it was a win-win-win. We killed a VC, the village got some meat, and his boys got to keep a token to remember Vietnam fondly by. A few days later, some boys from Stars and Stripes came by to ask about what happened, but I simply referred them to my gunner and co-pilot. They always had more to say anyway. I tried my best to forget the elephant and the look in its eyes and managed to do so by the time I left Vietnam, but that was really only because that memory was replaced by even more gruesome images. I was first reminded of the poor thing when I returned home. The trip back to Florida was long and tiring, but I was relieved to walk through my front door and hug my family. My wife and 2 oldest sons greeted me on the front stoop with big hugs and many I love yous. My youngest ran to us when he realized Daddy did actually come home and his older brothers weren't just telling lies again. He was clutching his favorite toy as he came from his room, a stuffed blue elephant with stunningly expressive but inanimate eyes. "Hey there, Brett," I said as I lifted him into the air and grabbed him tight. "How about we go to the store and get you one of those new G.I. Joe dolls to play with?" The photo I chose for today is a statue of an elephant. It looks like it's at a temple or a shrine. It is hard to tell. Regardless, it feels like it's in a place of importance. 100 Days. June 16, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I am writing to you at Minnie's on the hope that you have gotten there safely by now. We got mail up here today, and I got your card and a long letter. I was glad to hear that Jim may be able to help you drive part way up. How was the wedding? Did you get to go? And if you did you enjoy it? And how did you find everyone at home? Tell Al that I have his hunting uniform. It is made like my flight suits. I'll get it on a slow boat payday, and maybe he will get it by hunting season. Also, he mentioned that he would like to have a ring for B from over here. So, if you will find out what he wants and how much he wants to spend for it and send me her ring size, I will be glad to get it and send it along. I have had myself a nasty cold since I got to Da Nang. In fact, it is the first one I've had since I got over here, I think. Anyway, I have sure felt rotten the last couple of days. I've been flying every day because we are so short on pilots, but there were a couple of days when I shouldn't have been. I called Vinh Long tonight and found out that we have lost another good pilot. One of the captains that came over with us was killed today down there. Tell me why, if you can, that I sent you that nice, easy-to-use camera, and you have had it over a month, and I still don't have one slide from you. Answer me that. One other thing. Please let me know if you can get by on your check next month. If so, I would like to keep the check that I get. If you can't, then I can send it to you with no problems. But I want to send my hold baggage next month, and there are still a few things I want to get. And this Da Nang trip has put me in a bind, too. But this time, it is not poker, I'm happy to say. I haven't played a hand of poker in about 4 months. In answer to your question about Sandy. Yes, I saw him when I was in Saigon. I'm sorry, but he doesn't impress me at all. I ran into him at the PX by accident. I made it a point not to see him anymore. Yeah, I buy color film. In fact, all I take is slides. All of the pictures that I sent to you were given to me. I guess you can tell I'm just going through your letter, looking for questions to answer, and I have run out. I love you all very much and miss you. I hope you enjoy your vacation, and when you get back to Florida, you can reserve us a cottage on the beach. Maybe we could even get the same one. All my love, Bill. In the months leading up to June 1965, Da Nang, Vietnam transformed into a pivotal hub for U.S. military operations. Following the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964, the U.S. escalated its involvement, culminating in the landing of 3,500 Marines at Da Nang on March 8, 1965, the first major deployment of American ground combat troops in Vietnam. Their initial mission was to defend the strategically vital Da Nang Air Base, which supported air operations like Operation Rolling Thunder and covert missions over Laos. By mid-1965, Da Nang had evolved into a bustling military enclave. The 3 Marine Amphibious Force, 3MAF, established its headquarters there, and the Marble Mountain Air Facility was constructed to accommodate the increasing number of helicopter squadrons. Despite these developments, the area remained perilous. On July 1, 1965, a mortar and sapper attack on Da Nang Air Base destroyed multiple aircraft and underscored the persistent threat from Viet Cong forces. Within this context, service members like Popi were stationed in Da Nang, experiencing the daily challenges of military life amid escalating conflict. In today's letter, dated June 16, 1965, he writes to Suzie, expressing hope that she has safely arrived at her destination. He mentions receiving her card and a long letter, and is pleased to hear that Jim may assist her with the drive. Bill inquires about a recent wedding and asks Suzie to convey his congratulations to Johnny. He also discusses sending a hunting uniform to Al and procuring a ring for B, requesting details on her preferences and ring size. He notes that he has been battling a nasty cold since arriving in Da Nang, the first since his deployment, but continues to fly daily missions due to a shortage of pilots. He shares the somber news of a fellow pilot's death in Vinh Long, reflecting the constant dangers faced by servicemen. Expressing mild frustration, he teases Suzie about not receiving any slides from the camera he sent over a month ago. Financially, Popi discusses the possibility of retaining his next paycheck to cover expenses related to his Da Nang assignment and sending his hold baggage, assuring Suzie that he can send the funds if she needs them. He also mentions encountering Sandy in Saigon, but was unimpressed and chose not to pursue further contact. Concluding his letter, Popi sends his love to Suzie and their children, expressing his longing for them and the hope of reserving a beach cottage upon their reunion. This correspondence provides a personal glimpse into the life of a serviceman during a critical period in Da Nang's military history, highlighting both the operational developments and the human experiences amid the Vietnam War. The photo I chose for today shows a helicopter hovering just above the ground. Behind it is a sign for what I assume is some municipality, as well as some South Vietnamese flags on flagpoles. I'm Alex Lowy, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Popi wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless. June 24, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I apologize for not writing sooner, but if you knew how hard I have been working this week, I know that you would understand. It has been a rough 6 weeks. Last night, I got a chance to finally get to bed early. I went to bed at 6 o'clock and woke up this morning at 7. Remind me to tell you all about the past week when I get home, 92 days. It was too much to put in a letter. We evacuated a whole town, though, and I got mortared. That scared the holy hell out of me. I was getting fuel at the time at a little strip that we work from when all of a sudden mortar rounds started falling all around us. I made my crew chief take the hose out and we took off, hoping we had enough fuel to get to the new marine strip near here to get fuel. When we finally set down on the marine field, I had been flying 13 minutes on my 20-minute warning light. Never a dull moment. I got an invitation to John's wedding. Tell him, when you see him though, that I got it late, so I couldn't make it. How is the vacation? Hope you are enjoying yourself, and I hope that the time is going by real fast for you. Right now, it is for me. The enclosed article is one in our paper about the town that you mentioned in one of your earlier letters. Thank God I was not involved in that one. Well, things are the same as always for me. I'm getting along okay and counting the days. I miss you all very much and love you very much. Say hello to everyone for me. All my love, Bill. Today I would like to talk about oral history, which is a method of gathering and preserving historical information through recorded interviews with people who have personal knowledge of past events. Unlike traditional history, which often relies on official records, documents, or statistical data, oral history centers on the voices and memories of individuals, allowing them to share their experiences, reflections, and emotions in their own words. This approach may offer a richer, more intimate understanding of the past, capturing details of everyday life, community traditions, and personal insights that might otherwise go undocumented. Oral history offers several unique advantages over written history. It captures emotion, voice, and nuance in a way that text often cannot, preserving the tone, cadence, and personality of the storyteller. It also allows historians to access the perspectives of people who may not have had the means or opportunity to record their experiences in writing, particularly members of communities whose voices are often absent from official archives. However, oral history also comes with limitations. Memory can be imperfect, shaped by time or personal bias, which means oral accounts may conflict with documented events or with each other. Additionally, oral histories require careful preservation and interpretation, as they rely heavily on context and the relationship between interviewer and interviewee. Still, when used alongside written records, oral history can deepen and humanize our understanding of the past. The 114th Aviation Company has an oral history book compiled by some of its veterans. It's titled Nights Over the Delta and covers the years 1963 through 1972. It was published in 2002, and the cover states, quote, "This is the story of that long, bloody war in Vietnam's Mekong Delta,
told by a small band of daunting young soldiers who saw it all in 9 years of combat out of Vinh Long airfield, south of Saigon. Popi is mentioned only once in the 400-page book. There's a quick quote by Chief Warrant II, Carl Hess, where it is said that in 1964, quote, "It was Bill Lowe's first mission with the Cobras, and he was flying with Cobra Lead and the Hog, 48 2.75-inch rockets and no machine guns. Bill was supposed to fire a given number of rockets. Somehow he jettisoned both rocket pods with the 48 rockets intact. You can imagine the concern about the possibility of these in the wrong hands, so a diligent search was made the next day until the rockets were found and recovered. Needless to say, Bill was reminded of this several times. Sort of like the chaplain who shot 2 holes in the roof of his hooch with his grease gun." What this provides us with is a contradiction between oral and written history. According to Carl Hess, this rocket mishap occurred in 1964. According to Popi's written account, it occurred in 1965. On March 11th, he wrote, "I flew with the platoon leader in the rocket ship. It carries 48 rockets and we call it the Hog." Now, this was the first time I had ever been in the Hog, so I didn't know a thing about rocket systems. So anyway, we are flying along and Captain Molinelli decides to fire a couple of rockets. He pulled the trigger and nothing happened, so he thought he didn't have the system on. There are 3 switches on the console to operate the rocket system. One is to arm them, one is to light them up, and one is to jettison the whole thing in case one of them catches on fire. Guess which switch he hit? You guessed it. He threw the whole set, 48 rockets and $5,000 worth of launchers, away. So this morning we had to go out and spend the whole morning recovering them. Of course, they weren't any good and we dumped them in the river, but at least the VC didn't get them. Again, it was certainly not my fault because I didn't even know about the switches, but you can imagine the kidding I had to take today. It's possible that Popi wasn't completely truthful in his retelling of the story to Meemaw in his letter, likely to save himself some embarrassment with his wife, wanting to look like he was competent and in control. But assuming he's telling the truth, this shows us the challenges of an oral history. Mr. Hess not only got the story wrong, and the year it happened, but also Popi's name, referring to him as Bill Lowe. There's also a chance that Popi publicly took the blame among the guys for the mishap for Captain Molinelli because he didn't want his CO to look bad. So Hess really believed it was Popi's fault. Who knows? I bring all this up to point out the fragility of history. Recollections and retellings are accurate to a certain degree, but they may not maintain the same sort of accuracy that we may otherwise want them to. The change in the story, however, may reflect what people want to remember, or what was more interesting to them. Sometimes, fiction is more fun than fact. I want to quickly mention that I adore Popi's joke about his brother John's wedding. Once again, we see an example of the man he was before he got back from Vietnam. He had a funny bone, but we rarely saw it. What a shame. The photo I chose for today shows a group of Vietnamese getting onto a plane. Perhaps they were being evacuated. There are multiple women with children hanging on their backs. June 27. USO, a home away from home. Dearest Suzie, how about a letter with a built-in commercial? I have paper, but I happened to be over at the USO and decided to use theirs. We have a pretty good USO here in Da Nang. They have a library, movie, cafe, and usually a pinochle game going on, so we spend most of our free time here. We haven't done anything since I wrote you last. All our ships are down for maintenance, and it looks like they will be down for a while. We were hoping to go home about the 5th of July, but I have my doubts about it. The colonel who runs things up here told us last night that he likes our work and wants to keep us at least another month. None of us had guts enough to tell him that all we want is to get back to Vinh Long. And I will be glad to get back. Mail and laundry are a real problem up here. I haven't gotten any mail now in a week. I still don't know if you got home all right. I'm assuming that you did and that no news is good news. We still don't have our orders yet. I hate to be a pessimist, but I can only think of one reason why we don't have them. I'm afraid that they are going to send a blanket order over here, sending all of us to this new air assault division being formed at Benin. That division is supposed to be operational by September. How are you and the boys enjoying your vacation? How is Minnie getting along now that you are up there? Have you visited your mother yet? I still want some slides or pictures of you and the boys. Well, there is no more news. We are just sitting around existing right now, which is fine with me. I love you and miss you very much. Sincerely, Bill. P.S. I was going to use 2 USO envelopes, but they are so cheap they don't even put glue on them. The Young Men's Christian Associations, the National Catholic Community Service, the National Jewish Welfare Board, the Young Women's Christian Association, the Salvation Army, the National Travelers Aid Association, supported primarily through United Fund's Community Chest and American Overseas Campaign. If you can't tell, today's letter was written on paper supplied by the USO, the United Service Organization, better known as the USO, has stood by U.S. service members for over 8 decades, offering moral support, entertainment, and connection across wars and eras. Born on February 4, 1941, the USO emerged when President Franklin D. Roosevelt called for a single civilian organization to unite efforts from 6 existing groups: the YMCA, the YWCA, Salvation Army, National Catholic Community Service, National Travelers Aid, and the National Jewish Welfare Board. By March, a nationwide volunteer network and recreational facilities deemed a home away from home were already opening across America. Within months of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the USO was on the move. USO canteens popped up in churches, dance halls, even railway stations and barns, wherever military personnel were stationed. These hubs offered coffee, donuts, letter-writing spaces, dance evenings, snacks, and, in time, hot meals. More importantly, they provided a sense of home, companionship, and sanity for soldiers separated from loved ones. Additionally, the USO is perhaps best known for its camp shows and live entertainment touring deep into war zones. Between October 1941 and 1947, over 400,000 performances were held across 3,000 clubs, featuring Hollywood icons from Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope to Marilyn Monroe and Judy Garland. These performances reached American troops even abroad. Bob Hope performed in Normandy just weeks after D-Day, and USO entertainers routinely went to the front lines in Europe, the Pacific, and North Africa. By war's end, the USO had served 160 million troops through nearly 300,000 performances and over 1,000 daily shows worldwide. After the war, the USO briefly disbanded in 1947, its mission deemed complete. But its legacy endured. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, the USO was swiftly reactivated. By 1953, it operated hundreds of centers and performed thousands of shows for U.S. forces and wounded soldiers in Korea and Japan. During the Vietnam War, the USO maintained a visible presence even before combat troops arrived. The first Saigon USO Club opened in April 1963, serving as a gathering spot well before major escalation. By 1965, there were at least 23 clubs across Vietnam and Thailand offering hot showers, calling cards, film processing, and hospitality staffed by civilian volunteers. Mostly women, who brought a touch of normalcy amid the conflict. Stars like John Wayne, Sammy Davis Jr., Martha Raye, and Anne Margaret performed thousands of shows in-country with Bob Hope, bringing the first USO Christmas show to Vietnam in 1964, as previously discussed. Through subsequent conflicts in the Middle East, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, and Enduring Freedom, the USO again adapted and expanded opening centers in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Their services included care packages, resilience programs for military families, and connectivity initiatives like free phone calls and internet access. Today, the USO operates over 200 centers in 27 U.S. states and 13 countries worldwide. It continues its essential programs, from airport lounges and USO to-go kits to spouse networking, baby showers, and the Bob Hope Legacy Reading Program. These efforts aim to support every stage of a military journey, from welcome to deployment to homecoming. While the USO is Congress-chartered, it remains a nonprofit relying heavily on volunteers, over 30,000 every year, plus private donations to sustain its mission. Its enduring credibility rests on a simple but profound promise: to strengthen the well-being of service members and their families. That promise has been kept since 1941, and through countless changes in warfare and society, remains central to its mission. What is perhaps most exciting about this letter is Popi's passing mention of the new Air Assault Division being formed at Benin. That division would soon become the 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile, officially activated on July 1st, 1965. Formed from the 11th Air Assault Division and the 2nd Infantry Division and the existing 1st Cavalry Division stationed in Korea, this new unit represented a dramatic shift in military doctrine. By September 1965, the division deployed to Vietnam, bringing with it over 400 helicopters and a new way of fighting that would define much of the war's tactical landscape. This division is best known for its affiliation with Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, the author of We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and the man who Mel Gibson depicted in the film We Were Soldiers. In November of 1965, Moore and the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the 1st Cav engaged in the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley. Members of the 114th were some of the people who consulted Moore and other people in leadership about their experiences with helicopters and helped develop the tactics that would later become standard practice. Had he stayed in the service, there is a chance that Popi could have been sent to advise the new division. Though that's a cool connection to history, I'm sure Popi was happy he didn't get involved with Moore and his heroics. The photo I chose for today features Martha Raye after a USO show. Martha Raye was a beloved American comedian, singer, and actress who became a USO icon during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Known affectionately as Colonel Maggie by the troops, she performed tirelessly for American service members, often going into combat zones to boost morale with her bold humor and brassy charm. In Vietnam, she toured bases and field hospitals, sometimes staying for weeks at a time, and became known for her deep commitment to the troops. Martha Raye is buried at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in the Post Cemetery, which is typically reserved for military personnel. She received this rare honor due to her exceptional service to the U.S. military as a civilian. She was even given an honorary Green Beret and the title of Honorary Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Special Forces. Her grave marker reads, Maggie, a proud American patriot. June 30, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I finally got a letter from you today. Naturally, I was worried about you making that long trip. I'm glad you made it okay. I'll bet you really had a time with Brian and Brett on the trip. We really have it rough up here this time. We've been starting out at 0500 every day this week and working until after dark. I am really pooped. I'll be glad to get back to Vinh Long. And it looks now like we will be going home about the 7th of July. Then maybe things will slack off a little. I hate to make this a short letter, but I am about asleep on my feet. One thing, though, before I close. You can stop worrying about that trailer moving bill. They took it out of my pay this month. It was $22.15, so that is out of the way now. I'm going to close for now. Nothing exciting happening anyway. The heat up here is driving me nuts. I love you and miss you. Kiss the boys for me and have a good vacation. All my love, Bill. I have previously mentioned the eulogy my dad gave for Popi at his celebration of life. He agreed to let me share it. I will be reading it today. For a guy who prides himself on never reading and not doing much writing, I think he did a pretty good job. I'm not going to give much context on the things he writes here. If you've been following along, you will get it. Or, if you're my dad listening to this, thanks for being so supportive of this project. His eulogy reads as follows. His shoes. My dad always said, never judge a person until you walk a mile in their shoes. His shoes took him all over the world, from the dusty dairy farms of South Georgia and Central Florida to the skies over North Carolina. From mock battlefields in Germany, where he captured Elvis in a war game exercise, to the airfields of Vietnam. From the west coast of Africa to a courtroom in New Guinea, he certainly walked an amazing journey. William Pryor Lowy was born on March 16, 1937, in Abbeville, Georgia, to William O'Dale and Effie Elizabeth Lowy. He was the oldest of 7 children. He married Susan Rose Lutzko in 1957 and was the father of 4 sons. He finally broke the Shirley bonds of earth for the last time on September 14, 2012. Dad was a very intelligent and ambitious person. My aunt and uncle told me he always had a great sense of adventure and he wanted to see the world. Well, he did. Dad quit high school to join the Army to help support the family and see the world. While in the Army, he earned his jump certification as part of the 82nd Airborne Division in 1955. He earned the rank of E7 at the youngest age in peacetime. He served with great honor, dedication, and distinction as a helicopter pilot as part of the 114th Aviation Company in Vietnam from October of 1964 to October of 1965, where he earned several accommodations of merit while in a combat zone. After Vietnam, he finished his enlistment as an instructor pilot. After the Army, he sprayed orange groves all over Florida for citrus helicopters and winter garden. From 1973 until 1984, he flew helicopters off of fishing boats for star-kissed tuna. This journey took him all over the world. He tried different things between fishing trips. He bought a boat and wanted to start a commercial fishing company in Florida, but that never worked out. He bought a tanning salon for Mom, which she ran for years and finally sold. He flew helicopters briefly in Houston, but always ended up back on the tuna boat. After the years fishing, he worked hard and earned his ocean vessel pilot's license, which meant that he could pilot any ocean-going vessel in the world. He finally gave up fishing and flying after he experienced a tail rotor failure that forced an emergency landing in the middle of the night on a moonless night. He told me that all he could think of as he was going down was that he was going to die this way after everything that he had been through in Vietnam. When he walked off the plane that brought him home from that trip, he never flew again, as a pilot or passenger. When he decided to give up fishing, he started a janitorial service, which he had for a number of years. He also worked as a dock manager for Ivy's department store. His last job was as a supervisor for the Florida Turnpike toll system. He and Mom enjoyed spending time at the Hard Rock in Tampa. He and my mom finally retired to McRae, Georgia, just as he always talked about wanting to do. He often spoke of wanting to tell Molly his story. Unfortunately, they were never able to get together when he wanted to talk or when Molly could get away from her hectic schedule of being mom to 2 young boys. I never really understood what he meant by his story. I knew that he was a decorated pilot in Vietnam. I knew that he was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. I knew that he sprayed orange groves and helped Bell Helicopters develop different equipment and techniques to help the citrus industry. I knew that he had his appendix removed in Liberia in an operating room that had to have animals shoot out before the surgery. I watched as he almost died from the infection that occurred after the operation and the poor care in Africa. I received the phone call from the State Department and saw the story on the world news that he had been arrested in Papua New Guinea for fishing in illegal waters. We kept up with his time in jail and the trial through the nightly news, the State Department, occasional phone calls, and the occasional letter with local news clippings that he would send us. I knew that he drank a lot. I knew it sucked not having him to be a dad. I knew that he wasn't there when I needed fatherly advice and guidance. I knew that it really pissed me off when he would be able to come to one of my baseball games but couldn't stay for the whole game because he had to get home because it was time for the evening for a drink. I knew that when I was younger, I would get really excited when he came home, but as I got older, he would come home and try to be dad only to leave again, and it just got to the point that I didn't care if he came home or not. When he did come home, it was worse than him not being there. It always seemed as though he chose a bottle of Jim Beam over his family. In my teenage years, I really began to dislike him. A lot. When I was in high school, there were many nights that I would have to go with Mom to clean the bank building because he was passed out. He always picked nights that I didn't have to work at my job in the grocery store and nights when I had a hot date. When I graduated from high school, I lived at home for about another year to help out with bills and his business. I finally moved out one morning after he and I had a fight that he didn't remember the next day. There were a lot of those, but this one was it. I don't even remember what it was about. After 40 years of drinking himself to sleep every night, we finally were able to get him on a path to sobriety because of a medication mix-up that almost killed him. I swear that guy had 9 lives. The time he spent in the hospital was very enlightening to say the least. Our family members would take turns sitting with him in the hospital as he recovered. He would drift in and out of sleep and would often wake briefly and have flashbacks to his time in Vietnam. Molly and I watched him try to wash blood and body parts out of his helicopter. He asked me to fill the buckets up with water. There were no buckets. He had me close his door one day because he didn't want the kids in his room. There were no kids at the door. The following years that he was sober proved that he was a different person, more like the person that Mom said he was before he went to Vietnam. A little distant, but different. He was a good and loving and supportive grandfather. We definitely had a better relationship later in his life. He once complimented me on the type of father that I was to my boys. He couldn't believe that I was the way that I was with them since I didn't have a good role model. I told him that he was a good role model to me of what not to be. I also told him that I tried to be the type of dad I wished I had when I was growing up. Again, his story. What could he tell us that we didn't already know? Well, as it turns out, there was plenty. He didn't graduate from high school, but did earn his GED in the Army. He definitely knew the value of a good education. He started out flying heavy lift helicopters, transferred to troop transport, and finished in gunships. He served with the 114th Aviation Company for 1 year in Vietnam. He earned 19 meritorious air service medals, a Bronze Star, a Cross of Gallantry, as well as several South Vietnamese medals in their defense. He told me that when he enlisted originally, he wanted to retire from the Army. When his reenlistment came up after Vietnam, he was told that he would have to serve one more tour in Vietnam, and he would be promoted. He told me that he chose not to re-up because he knew that if he went back to Vietnam, he would not make it home alive. As I got older, he began to talk a little more about his time in Vietnam. I don't know if it was because he thought he was protecting us from the horrors of war that he experienced, or if time had made it easier to talk about. He was born in 1937 and was 8 years old when World War II ended. He watched as the brave men and women of the greatest generation came home from war to ticker tape parades and treated as heroes. That instilled a great sense of pride and patriotism in him that helped shape his desire to serve the country as a warrior. He told me how disillusioned he was when he came home from Vietnam. He said that when he walked through the airport in San Francisco, he was spit on and called a baby killer by a bunch of snowflakes, my words, not his, I cleaned it up, that probably still lived with their parents, let alone witness their friends dying in front of them. In 1991, Mom, Molly, Brett, and I attended Dad's first air group reunion with him at Fort Rucker, since they all served together so many years before. It was a humbling experience to be there with him and meet some of the men that he served with in Vietnam. There were a lot of handshakes, hugs, and tears for their brothers that didn't come home with them. I think it was the first time that I ever saw Dad show any emotion. There was one guy that approached him that Dad didn't seem real interested in talking to, which was kind of odd considering all the people that he introduced us to. He was actually kind of rude to the guy. When the guy walked away, Dad explained that many years ago they had a disagreement over a mission that they had just returned from. The gunships were doing rocket and machine gun passes over a VC village. When it was Dad's time to make a pass, a woman reached down and held a baby up in front of her. Dad pulled out of formation. He said he just couldn't do it. When they returned to the base, the guy that Dad was rude to turned out to be a lieutenant that was leading the mission. The lieutenant got in Dad's face and started screaming at him and threatened to court-martial him for being a coward. The guy kept on yelling until Dad had enough. Dad said he reached into his holster, pulled out his .45, put it to the lieutenant's chin, and said, "I think we are done here," and walked away. No charges were ever filed. When Dad passed away, we started going through all of his papers and awards from Vietnam. For a guy that threw everything away, he saved some pretty amazing things. We all knew that he had taken a lot of pictures in Vietnam. He was quite the photographer. We found a handwritten journal that he kept for the first month that he was in Vietnam. In November of 2021, Mom told us that she found every letter that Dad sent her while he was in Vietnam. Later that month, when we met in Georgia to do the Meemaw swap with Nancy, Alex started reading through some of them. It was like going back in time to hear his words, spoken by Alex, to hear him talking about his terrifying experiences in a war while still trying to be a 27-year-old father and a husband half a world away. We didn't get through all the letters that night, but it was still an enlightening evening. In early December, Alex messaged Molly and wanted us to call him when we were together because he had found another letter that he wanted to read to us. That night, Molly called him and put him on speaker so we could both hear him. Dad started out the letter apologizing to Mom for not writing for the last 2 days. He went on to explain that he had been drunk for the past 2 days because of a mission that he was a part of. The gunships were flying air cover for a squad that went out to find a group of soldiers that were ambushed. Dad thought the area had cleared out of all of Vietnam. He told the captain on the ground that the area was clear and was safe to get out of the armored personnel carrier. When he did, a sniper's bullet hit the captain in the head. The captain turned out to be a good friend of his, as well as the captain that they were trying to save. His words struck my soul. How in the world are you ever the same? As the letter went on, he struggled with the guilt and responsibility for his friend's death that he witnessed. He ended his letter, as he did all of them, telling Mom how much he missed and loved her, and the boys, and how much he wished he was with them. The letter truly had a very unexpected and profound impact on me. At that moment, I truly understood what he meant about not judging anyone until you walk a mile in their shoes. I can't possibly fathom how a person deals with an experience like that one, let alone all of the others. I truly wish he could have shared those experiences with me. I could never fully understand the effect that Vietnam had on him, but maybe I might have been able to understand how he became the person that I knew. He certainly didn't deserve the disdain and disrespect of a selfish teenager that didn't understand why his dad wasn't there for him growing up. I wish I would have known. Maybe I could have been there for him to help him deal with the nightmares that haunted his sleep. I have so many questions I wish I could ask him. Why didn't you tell anyone about your experiences in Vietnam? Were you trying to protect us, or was it too painful to talk about? Did you choose to fish for so long because it was a good way to help you deal with the nightmares? Why did we find a helicopter pilot's license from Costa Rica when you were never in Costa Rica? Why did we find copies of CIA applications in your paperwork? Why did you fly missions into Laos? Why were you flying a helicopter in the middle of a moonless night off the coast of Africa? Why didn't you help me take a walk in your shoes? The photo I chose for today appears to be a medevac helicopter for the 114th, which is our favorite ideal of Popi as a helicopter pilot. One that saved people.
I'm Alex Lowy, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Popi wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.